her filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash!
HOA President Karen Bradshaw screamed this as her white BMW barreled toward my pregnant heifers. Horn blasting nonstop, she scattered my prize cattle, worth tens of thousands each, into total panic on my private Texas ranch road. I'd warned her for months. She kept smashing through my gate, treating my property like her personal shortcut. This time, she nearly ran me over.
This road's community property now, hillbilly!
Dust choked me as she sped off, leaving one heifer trembling in early labor from the terror. These 50 acres are my grandfather's legacy, where he worked his whole life and is buried. No entitled Karen gets to steal that. Watching her taillights vanish, I snapped, no more warnings. That night, I built something she'd never expect. What would you do if an HOA Karen called you redneck trash on your own land and nearly hit your livestock? Ever fought back against one? Watching from Texas? My name's Jake Riverside, and I've been dealing with entitled city folks my whole damn life. But Karen Bradshaw? She took entitlement to a whole new level. These 50 acres have been Riverside land since my grandfather cleared the mesquite and rattlesnakes back in 1940. Every morning I wake up to the same sounds he did. Cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of old wood settling in the Texas heat, and the sweet smell of hay mixed with that distinctive scent of dust and diesel that means home. This ranch isn't just property. It's where I proposed to Sarah under the lightning-split oak tree, where we raised 2 kids who are now city folk themselves down in Austin, where 3 generations of Riversides are buried overlooking Willow Creek. When I run my hand along the weathered fence posts, I can still feel the splinters my daddy got putting them up. My grandfather built our ranch road in 1942, 1 truckload of caliche at a time, runs a quarter-mile from County Road 1247 through the main pasture, straight to our house, always been private. The deed says so in black and white, signed and witnessed back when a man's handshake still meant something. These days, I'm semi-retired from full-time ranching, do consulting for younger cattlemen, help them navigate the maze of regulations that'd make my grandfather spin in his grave. Sarah teaches 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary, been there 15 years, knows every kid's name and their parents' business too. We're not rich, but we're respected. At least we were, until our new neighbor decided respect was optional. Karen Bradshaw rolled into Millbrook Estates like she owned the whole county. Divorced real estate agent from Dallas with more money than sense, bought the biggest house in that fancy development for close to $1 million. Always dressed like she was heading to some charity luncheon even when she was just checking her mailbox. The woman wore high heels to get her newspaper. Within 6 months, she'd maneuvered herself into the HOA president seat and started what she called community improvement initiatives. Translation: making everyone's life miserable until they bent the knee to Queen Karen's suburban vision. The trouble started innocent enough. Karen figured out that cutting through my ranch road saved her precious 3 minutes getting to the highway. For a woman who spent an hour every morning applying enough makeup to paint a barn, you'd think 3 minutes wouldn't matter. But Karen wasn't the asking permission type. First time through, I thought it was a mistake. Second time, I walked out polite as Sunday church and explained it was private property. She powered down that BMW window and flashed me a smile so fake it could have been made in China. "Oh, honey, this little dirt road? That's been public access forever. You can't just block neighbors from using established community routes." I showed her the deed, pointed to the signs, explained that everything past my cattle gate belonged to the Riverside family, had since before she was born. Her smile turned sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, bless your heart, sugar. We'll just see about that." Any Texan knows "bless your heart" is fighting words wrapped in fake politeness, and that sugar dripped with enough venom to kill a horse. But the real declaration of war came the next morning. I was moving my prize Angus bull, 1,500 pounds of pure muscle worth more than Karen's car payment, when she came barreling through at her usual 7:15. Laid on that horn like the world was ending, scattered my cattle, and when I stepped into her path with my hands up, she actually accelerated. The sound of German engineering meets Texas gravel at 30 miles per hour is something you don't forget. Neither is the taste of dust mixed with exhaust fumes, or the sight of a $2,000 heifer limping away from near miss with a BMW bumper. That's when I realized Karen Bradshaw hadn't just moved to the neighborhood, she'd invaded it. And this old rancher was about to teach her the difference between city rules and country justice. 3 days after Karen nearly killed my prize bull, she brought out the big guns. I was replacing fence wire, $1,500 worth of damage from my bull's BMW-induced panic attack, when a process server appeared at my gate. City boy in a cheap suit, sweating through his polyester shirt like ice cream on asphalt, clutching an envelope thick enough to choke a horse. "Jake Riverside, you've been served." The legal papers had that expensive feel lawyers love, heavy bond paper that crackles with authority and billable hours. Morrison, Patterson and Associates out of Dallas. Karen had called in the cavalry. 3 pages of legal horseshit boiled down to this: stop blocking established public easement, or get sued into next century. They threw around fancy phrases like prescriptive easement and continuous public use for over 2 decades. The smell of fear and bullshit was overwhelming. Here's what those Dallas lawyers were counting on: that some small-town rancher would roll over rather than fight. They figured intimidation beats facts every time. Hell, it probably works most of the time. Daddy always said never bring a knife to a gunfight, but he never mentioned what to do when lawyers bring bazookas to a property dispute. Next morning, I drove to Millbrook County Courthouse, spent 6 hours in the records room breathing dust and determination. Those deed books smell like old leather and broken dreams, but they told the truth Karen's lawyers were trying to bury. Not only was my road clearly private property, but my father had corrected the original survey error back in 1987. Every legal document screamed Riverside land louder than a dinner bell. Years ago, Daddy told me something while we were fixing this same fence. "Son, property lines are like marriage vows. They only work if you defend them." Back then, I thought he was talking about keeping cattle in. Now I knew better. But while I was building my legal fortress, Karen was orchestrating her next symphony of destruction. The revelation came from Eddie Martinez, our mail carrier and unofficial town gossip network. Eddie's been delivering mail in Millbrook County for 15 years, knows who's pregnant before their husbands do and which teenagers are sneaking beer behind the grain elevator. Tuesday morning, Eddie lingered at my mailbox longer than usual. "Jake, you know that HOA princess of yours? She's been running real estate showings, promising buyers something called exclusive ranch road access. I heard her pitch when I delivered certified mail to her last week." The puzzle pieces clicked together like my grandfather's old Winchester chambering around. Karen wasn't stealing my road for convenience. She was selling access to it as a premium feature. Overheard her telling some Dallas couple they'd get private ranch road privileges as part of their homeowner benefits, Eddie continued, adjusting his postal cap against the morning sun. Said it gives them authentic Texas ranch living without the cattle smell. She's got over 2 million in pending sales, all promising that access. So Princess Karen had painted herself into a corner slicker than pig grease. She'd promised buyers my property as their amenity. If she couldn't deliver, those sales would collapse faster than a politician's promises. I started documenting everything with the dedication of a monk copying scripture. Security cameras went up at my gate, perfectly legal in Texas when it's your own dirt. Automatic timestamp recording captured every illegal crossing. I created logs that would make an accountant weep. Dates, times, license plates, duration of trespass. The certified mail to Karen and her HOA board was poetry in legal language. Stay off Riverside property or face criminal prosecution. Karen's response arrived not through lawyers, but through pure escalation. She started treating my ranch road like her personal highway system. Morning commute, drove through. Lunch run, drove through. Evening yoga class, you bet your ass she drove through. Sometimes she brought passengers for the full tourist experience. And here's our community access road that connects to the historic ranch property. The woman was selling guided tours of my stolen land. The sound of her BMW became my daily torture. That distinctive purr of German engineering followed by the aggressive crunch of gravel that didn't belong to her. Every morning at 7:15, every evening at 6:30, regular as church bells and twice as annoying. But Karen wasn't satisfied with just theft. She filed noise complaints against my cattle operation. 40 years of ranching, never one problem, and suddenly my cows were disturbing the peace. She reported my consulting work as unlicensed commercial activity. The woman was trying to destroy everything my family had built because I wouldn't hand over my birthright to her real estate empire. That evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch watching sunset paint the sky red over land that had buried 3 generations of Riversides. The cicadas were singing their evening song, mixing with the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. "She's not going to stop," Sarah said quietly, her teacher's intuition cutting straight to the heart of it. "No," I agreed, feeling something hard settle in my chest. "But neither am I." Karen's psychological warfare started at dawn and ran past midnight. She'd come screaming through my gate at 5:30 a.m., laying on that BMW horn like Gabriel announcing Judgment Day, scattering my cattle during their morning feed. Then again around midnight, headlights slicing through darkness like searchlights, spooking heifers that had finally settled down for the night. The stress was killing my herd. Pregnant cattle don't handle chaos well. Affects everything from milk production to calf birth weights. Each of those heifers represented $15,000 on 4 legs, and Karen was terrorizing them for sport. But the real sabotage started when she began leaving my gate wide open. I'd find it swinging in the morning breeze like a drunk man's handshake, my prize cattle wandering onto County Road 1247, looking for adventure they couldn't afford. In Texas, loose livestock means liable rancher. One heifer meeting a pickup truck at 60 miles per hour would bankrupt me faster than a casino addiction. The morning ritual became a nightmare symphony, the acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixing with my own fear sweat as I'd chase scattered Angus back through the gate Karen had deliberately sabotaged. The woman was trying to destroy me, one opened gate at a time. Then came the insurance ambush. My cattle insurance adjuster showed up after receiving anonymous reports about unsafe road conditions. Phillips was a nervous little man who looked like he'd never seen anything bigger than a poodle, sweating through his city clothes like ice cream on hot asphalt. "Mr. Riverside, we're facing significant liability exposure if this road remains semi-public," he wheezed, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief that was losing the war against Texas heat. "Additional coverage for public access liability will cost $800 monthly." $800. Nearly 10 grand a year. My profit margins were tighter than bark on a tree, and Karen knew it. She was pricing me out of my own property through insurance terrorism. I filed criminal trespassing charges, but Deputy Martinez just shrugged like a man who'd seen too many neighbor feuds. "Jake, unless there's proven property damage, this stays civil court. Keep documenting, but we need more than driving violations for criminal charges." So I documented everything like a man possessed. 47 separate incidents, each one photographed, timed, and cataloged. My case file grew thicker than a preacher's promise book. The real gut punch came when I discovered Karen's political connections. Betty Coleman pulled me aside during one of my courthouse research trips. Betty'd worked county records since dirt was invented, knew every secret buried in those filing cabinets. "Jake, that HOA woman's got connections," she whispered like we were planning revolution. "Her ex-husband's Dallas City Councilman Richard Bradshaw. She's been calling Commissioner Williams about emergency rural road access issues. Girls got juice, you don't." Suddenly, this wasn't just crazy neighbor versus stubborn rancher. This was connected money versus country folk, and the deck was stacked higher than Sunday pancakes. Karen launched her social media blitzkrieg next. Created Millbrook Community Safety on Facebook, posting pictures of my locked gate with captions that'd make a snake oil salesman blush. "Rancher blocks emergency access. Lives at risk." The comment section exploded like a kicked hornet's nest. HOA residents who didn't know shit from Shinola started sharing horror stories about dangerous rural neighbors and selfish property owners. Karen was rewriting history with every post, painting me as the villain while she played victim. But karma has a sense of humor, and mine came through Maria Santos. Maria called me Tuesday night, voice tight as new barbed wire. Maria's the only real estate agent in 3 counties who won't sell ice to Eskimos, which makes her rarer than hen's teeth. "Jake, I'm breaking confidence here, but you need to know. Karen's been promising buyers exclusive ranch road access as part of their purchase package. She's got $2.3 million in pending sales, all banking on access to your property." The whole picture snapped into focus like a rifle scope zeroing in. Karen wasn't just stealing my road, she was selling it. Every contract promised buyers authentic Texas ranch access as a premium amenity. "She's financially desperate, Jake," Maria continued. "Divorce left her drowning in debt. These sales are her only lifeline. If she can't deliver that ranch access, contracts collapse and she's looking at bankruptcy court." So Princess Karen had bet the farm on stealing mine. She'd painted herself into a corner slicker than owl shit, promising buyers my property as their playground. Her entire financial survival depended on my surrender. That night, I spread property surveys across my kitchen table, studying boundary lines by lamplight while Sarah made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The smell of Maxwell House mixed with determination filled the air. "You're planning something," Sarah observed, reading my face like she'd been doing for 25 years. "Damn right I am." I traced the property line with my finger. "Karen wants to play hardball? Time to show her what a real Texas fastball looks like." Karen's desperation turned her nastier than a stepped-on copperhead. The environmental attack came first. She filed complaints with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, claiming my cattle were poisoning local water sources and creating unsanitary conditions that threaten community health. Pure bullshit wrapped in official paperwork, but it brought Inspector Rodriguez to my ranch with testing equipment and a government attitude. Rodriguez turned out decent enough, spent 4 hours checking water quality, cattle waste management, and grazing rotation. The man knew his business, unlike the pencil-pushing bureaucrats who'd sent him based on Karen's lies. "Your operation's cleaner than most commercial dairies, Mr. Riverside," Rodriguez said, sealing water samples that would prove my innocence. Whoever filed these complaints either doesn't understand cattle ranching or has other motives. Filing false environmental reports carries serious penalties. The acrid smell of his diesel truck mixed with my growing anger as Rodriguez drove away. Karen was weaponizing every government agency she could find, hoping one would stick. But while Karen was playing environmental terrorist, I was doing detective work that would make Sherlock Holmes proud. Betty Coleman's courthouse research hit pay dirt bigger than the East Texas oil boom. Karen's real estate license had more red flags than a communist parade, 2 previous suspensions for the exact same scam she was running on me. "North Dallas, 2019, Betty whispered during my weekly record search, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a woman who'd found buried treasure. Promised buyers exclusive access to private lake property. Owner sued for fraud. Karen paid $95,000 in damages, lost her license for 18 months. The woman was a career property thief. This wasn't personal hatred. This was her goddamn business model. Karen's daily invasion force escalated from annoying to insulting. She started bringing potential buyers through my ranch, like it was their private tour route, complete with staged photo shoots and picnic lunches on my property. These Dallas suburbanites would pile out of their luxury SUVs, take selfies with my cattle, and discuss property values while standing on land their realtor didn't own. The sound of designer boots crunching on my gravel became the soundtrack to pure rage. Karen would point out amenities like my old oak tree and creek access as selling points for houses that had no legal right to either. I documented every trespass with the obsession of a man collecting evidence for his own murder trial. Video footage of Karen's fraudulent sales presentations, audio recordings promising guaranteed ranch access, signed statements from buyers who'd been lied to about property boundaries. My evidence file grew thicker than a Richardson phone book. The insurance fraud attempt that followed was so brazen it belonged in a criminal justice textbook. Karen filed claims against HOA insurance for community road maintenance, trying to bill my private road as association property. Her insurance company investigated faster than gossip spreads in a small town, discovering what every county record showed: my road was private property with zero HOA ownership. Karen faced potential criminal charges for filing fraudulent insurance claims. But the real revelation came when I uncovered the financial desperation driving Karen's madness. Through Maria Santos, I learned the HOA budget was more broken than a politician's promise. Karen had approved over $180,000 in unauthorized community improvements, designer landscaping that cost more than most folks' houses, streetlights expensive enough to illuminate Dallas, and a pool complex that looked like something from a country club. HOA members are furious about the special assessments, Maria explained during our confidential conversation. Karen needs property values to jump 15% just to justify her spending. Without that ranch access marketing angle, she's facing a recall election and personal bankruptcy. The woman had gambled her entire future on stealing my property. Karen's desperation peaked when she contacted County Commissioner Williams about eminent domain, wanting the government to seize my ranch road for emergency access. Williams, who'd known my family since before Karen was born, shut her down like a saloon on Sunday. No demonstrated public need, Williams told her. Emergency services have proper access routes that don't require private property seizure. But Karen's media blitz was just getting started. She brought Channel 8 News to film her version of reality, painting me as the unreasonable old rancher blocking progress and community safety. The Thursday evening broadcast made my blood pressure spike like a thermometer in hell. There was Karen, playing concerned citizen while some fresh-faced reporter repeated her lies about emergency access and community needs. They made me look like a selfish bastard standing in the way of public safety. Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, her teacher's face showing the kind of controlled fury that made misbehaving students wet themselves. That manipulative bitch just declared war on our family's reputation. Standing in my own living room, watching my character get assassinated on television by a woman who'd built her career on stealing other people's property, I felt something cold and permanent settle in my chest. "You're right," I said, clicking off the TV. "Time to end this permanently." The phone call that changed everything came while I was mucking out horse stalls, knee-deep in work that smelled like honest labor and horse sweat. "Jake, drop whatever you're doing and get to my office. Now." Tom Bellamy's voice carried the excitement of a man who'd just struck oil in his backyard. 20 minutes later, I sat in Tom's law office, staring at documents that would have made my grandfather dance a jig. The original Millbrook Estates development contract, buried deeper than buried treasure in county filing cabinets. "Section 12, subsection D," Tom said, his finger stabbing at language that read like the Gettysburg Address to my property-loving soul. "The HOA development agreement specifically waives any claims to pre-existing ranch roads within 1,000 feet of development boundaries." I read those beautiful words 3 times. Karen's precious HOA had legally surrendered rights to my road before they'd poured the first concrete foundation. Her high-dollar Dallas lawyers had either missed this completely or were gambling I'd never find it. The taste of victory was sweeter than Sarah's peach cobbler. "But wait, there's more," Tom continued, sounding like a late-night TV pitchman selling miracle cures. He slid another document across his desk. "Karen personally guaranteed the HOA's construction loan overruns. Her house, her BMW, every asset she owns is collateral for $340,000 in debt." The financial picture hit me like lightning striking twice in the same spot. Karen's desperation wasn't just about convenience or power. She was drowning in debt. If property values didn't spike 15% within 18 months, she'd lose everything she owned. "Your neighbor's been busy," Tom said, pulling out a third file that smelled like karma coming home to roost. Dallas County court records show an identical scheme from 2019. Karen promised lake access to buyers, got sued when the real owner said hell no, paid $95,000 in damages. Professional property thief. That's what Karen Bradshaw was. A career criminal who specialized in selling other people's land to unsuspecting buyers. My ranch wasn't her first rodeo. It was just her latest mark. The office suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on Karen's lies. Outside, I could hear traffic humming on the highway. Normal people living normal lives while I sat holding evidence of a con game that would make carnival hustlers proud. "The cherry on top," Tom said, clearly enjoying himself, "is that 3 current buyers have signed contracts specifically promising exclusive ranch road access as a primary selling point. Karen's already collected earnest money based on access she doesn't own." So the woman had painted herself into a corner slicker than wet paint. She'd bet everything on stealing my property, promised buyers amenities that belonged to me, and personally guaranteed debt she couldn't repay without property value increases she couldn't deliver. Karen couldn't retreat without facing fraud charges and bankruptcy, but she couldn't advance because my property rights were documented back to when this county was still frontier territory. "What's our play, Tom?" "Legally, you're bulletproof, but Karen's financial desperation makes her unpredictable. She's facing personal ruin, which means she'll keep escalating until something gives." I thought about the daily harassment, the insurance attacks, the environmental lies, the media character assassination. Karen had already crossed every line except physical violence. She was like a rabid dog backed into a corner. Dangerous precisely because she had nothing left to lose. "Then I need to make it impossible for her to keep fighting," I said, the solution forming in my mind like storm clouds gathering strength. "What are you thinking?" "Something permanent, something she can never cut, climb, or lawyer her way around." I stood up, my decision as solid as Texas bedrock. Time to build Karen a wall she'll never forget. The wall design meeting felt like plotting a bank heist, except instead of stealing money, I was stealing Karen's ability to steal my property. Ray Molina rolled up Friday morning in a pickup truck that had seen more hard work than a congressman's conscience. Ray's built everything from cattle chutes to tornado shelters. If it needs to survive Texas weather and Texas women, Ray's your man. "So you want to stop a pissed-off woman in a German luxury car?" Ray asked, spitting Red Man tobacco juice with the accuracy of a sniper. "Hell, Jake, that's harder than stopping a tornado." We walked my property line where the ranch road met Karen's precious development. Ray took measurements while I explained the tactical situation like we were planning D-Day. "Here's your fortress," Ray said, sketching in the dirt with a mesquite stick. 12 feet high, steel-reinforced concrete, foundation 4 feet deep. Even if she gets hold of a tank, she ain't driving through this. The engineering was poetry in concrete. 8-inch walls with steel rebar grids strong enough to stop everything short of divine intervention. The top would angle outward. Can't climb over what's leaning toward you. The foundation would be deeper than Karen's fake concern for community safety. Years back, when my daddy was dealing with cattle rustlers, he taught me something about permanent solutions. "Son, sometimes you gotta build a fence so strong that even thinking about crossing it gives folks a headache." This wall would give Karen migraines for the rest of her natural life. The smell of fresh concrete dust mixed with morning dew as Ray explained permits. Agricultural security barrier under Texas Rural Property Code. You're protecting livestock from vehicular harassment. Probably qualify for a tax break. Permit process cost $500 and 3 days of bureaucratic tap dancing, but every rubber stamp was pure gold. Legal, proper, and absolutely unassailable. Just the way my grandfather would have done it. The cost breakdown made my checking account whimper. $47,000 for materials and labor, $3,000 for permits and inspections, $2,000 contingency for Murphy's Law. Total damage, $52,000 to solve a problem that could have been fixed with basic human decency. But I'd been saving for this day since Karen's first trespass. Sometimes a man has to invest in peace of mind the same way he invests in good cattle. Ray's technical specs sounded like something from a military manual. Solar-powered gate system with backup battery, motion sensor security cameras, keypad entry with rotating access codes. The whole setup will run itself and document every dipshit who tries to mess with it. Sarah joined us with iced tea cold enough to shock a preacher and wisdom sharp enough to cut glass. "Y'all realize Karen's going to have a complete meltdown when this construction starts?" "That's the general idea," I said, savoring the mental image of Karen's face meeting concrete reality. "Been escalating for months. Time to force her hand when all her cards are duds." The construction timeline was aggressive as a campaign promise. Foundation work Monday through Wednesday, wall construction Thursday through Monday, gate installation and electronics Tuesday and Wednesday. 10 working days to build something Karen could never remove, bypass, or litigate into submission. Ray suggested timing construction during peak real estate season when Karen's potential buyers would witness their promised ranch access disappearing behind an impenetrable wall, maximum financial impact when it would hurt most. Strategic thinking, Ray nodded like a general approving battle plans. Hit her in the wallet, only place some people feel pain. We planned the media component with the precision of a presidential campaign. Jim Patterson at the Millbrook Gazette had covered my family fairly for decades. Time to make sure the real story got told before Karen could weave her web of lies. The community angle fell into place naturally. Millbrook County Fair happened to coincide with projected completion, nothing like hometown celebration to showcase agricultural security and property rights victory. Financial planning was tighter than new boots, but manageable. Cattle fund covered construction, future speaking engagements about property rights would refill coffers, and insurance premiums would drop with controlled access eliminating liability nightmares. But psychological preparation was crucial. Karen would throw everything at this project: construction sabotage, media manipulation, legal harassment, maybe physical confrontation. I needed to stay cooler than a rattlesnake in winter. Document everything and let concrete do the talking. The evening planning session wrapped with Sarah and me on the porch, watching sunset paint the sky red over land that would soon be permanently protected. Cattle calls mixed with the distant hum of highway traffic that Karen would never again use to justify trespassing. "You absolutely sure about this?" Sarah asked, her teacher's voice carrying 25 years of knowing when I was committed past the point of reason. "Never been surer," I replied, feeling satisfaction settle in my bones like good whiskey. Time to teach Princess Karen what permanent means in Texas. The mockingbird in our oak tree started its evening song, mimicking car horns and construction sounds like it was already practicing for the show to come. The concrete mixer rumbled to life Monday morning at first light, and Karen materialized like a bad omen 15 minutes later. I was directing Ray's crew on foundation placement when that familiar BMW engine came screaming down my ranch road, followed by the theatrical slam of car doors and the aggressive click, click, click of high heels on gravel that belonged to someone else. "Stop this illegal construction immediately!" Karen shrieked, power walking toward our work site in a white business suit that probably cost more than my annual veterinary bills. Behind her marched 3 other women who looked like they'd escaped from a charity auction planning committee. The morning air still carried the sweet smell of mesquite and diesel fumes as Karen's emergency HOA delegation invaded my property line like suburban conquistadors claiming new territory. "Morning, ladies," I said, tipping my hat with the manners my grandmother had beaten into me with a wooden spoon. "Y'all are trespassing on private property. Might want to retreat to public roads before someone calls the sheriff." Karen's face turned redder than a spanked baby's ass. "This is community property. You can't build barriers to block emergency vehicle access." Ray looked up from his concrete forms with the patience of a saint dealing with sinners. "Ma'am, everything's properly permitted for agricultural security improvement. County's already signed off on every measurement." That's when Karen unveiled her secret weapon. A nervous man in a hard hat who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on God's green earth. "This is County Inspector Williams," Karen announced with the smugness of someone holding a royal flush. "He's here to shut down your code violations." Except Williams examined our permit folder like a man reviewing his own death certificate. Ray handed him documentation with the confidence of someone whose paperwork was more airtight than a mason jar. "Everything appears in compliance," Williams mumbled after 5 minutes that deflated Karen's righteous indignation like a punctured balloon. "Setbacks meet requirements. Foundation depth exceeds agricultural standards." The look on Karen's face could have curdled fresh milk. Her emergency committee started whispering like church ladies sharing scandal while Williams escaped to his county truck faster than a cat with its tail on fire. But Princess Karen wasn't ready to surrender. Tuesday morning's sabotage discovery made my blood hotter than July asphalt. Someone had attacked our foundation forms with all the skill of a drunk toddler. Concrete molds pried apart, rebar scattered like giant pickup sticks, and footprints in the mud telling stories of amateur hour vandalism. My security cameras had recorded the whole pathetic show. A figure in dark clothes wielding a crowbar around 2 a.m., working with about as much construction knowledge as a city dog has about cattle herding. The perpetrator's face stayed hidden, but that BMW parked on the county road was more recognizable than Sunday church bells. The acrid smell of fresh concrete dust mixed with my rising fury as Ray surveyed the damage with professional disgust. "Whoever did this knows about as much construction as I know about ballet dancing," Ray observed, scratching his head under his hard hat. "Cost us 1 day and 800 in materials, but they hit all the wrong spots, like watching someone try to kill a bull by tickling its ears." Deputy Martinez arrived faster than gossip spreads in a small town, reviewed our video evidence, and shook his head with the weariness of a man who'd seen too much human stupidity. "Clear criminal mischief?" Martinez said, photographing boot prints and crowbar gouges. "But without facial identification, that BMW's just circumstantial evidence. Need more to make charges stick." Karen's media circus launched that afternoon with all the subtlety of a train wreck in slow motion. 3 news crews descended on Millbrook like locusts, summoned by Karen's sob story about aggressive ranchers threatening community safety. She'd staged a neighborhood rally complete with hand-painted signs screaming, "Emergency access saves lives" and "Stop agricultural bullying." The irony was thicker than cold molasses. A woman who'd been terrorizing my family for months playing victim while cameras rolled. But I'd prepared for this media ambush like a general planning battle strategy. Tom Bellamy distributed evidence packets to every reporter, permits, property deeds, documentation of Karen's systematic trespassing, and her colorful history of real estate fraud. "Mr. Riverside is exercising fundamental constitutional property rights," Tom told the cameras with the calm authority of someone holding all the legal cards. "Miss Bradshaw has been systematically violating private property while fraudulently selling access rights to unsuspecting buyers." Suddenly, reporters became interested in a different narrative when Tom revealed Karen's previous license suspensions and pending fraud investigations. The buyer rebellion started that evening when truth hit the evening news like a bucket of cold water. Maria Santos called during supper with news sweeter than Sarah's peach cobbler. Jake, the Henderson family just canceled their $500,000 contract. They're demanding deposit refunds and threatening fraud lawsuits. 2 other buyers are following suit. Karen's house of cards was collapsing faster than a politician's campaign promises, all because she couldn't deliver what she'd never owned. Standing in my kitchen, watching the evening news show Karen squirming under hostile questions while concrete trucks worked behind her, I felt satisfaction settle in my bones like good whiskey. Karen's desperation reached nuclear levels Wednesday morning when she tried to frame my cattle operation as a biological weapon. I was checking pregnant heifers when a Texas Department of Health van pulled up to my gate, followed by Karen's BMW like a vulture trailing roadkill. Out stepped Dr. Patricia Reeves, a veterinary inspector who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else than investigating fake cattle diseases. "Mr. Riverside, I'm here about reports of diseased livestock potentially contaminating local water sources," Dr. Reeves said, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who'd been dragged into neighbor warfare. Karen emerged from her car wearing surgical gloves and a face mask, playing the role of concerned citizen protecting public health. The woman should have won an Oscar for her performance as caring community leader instead of desperate criminal. "Doctor, those animals have been showing symptoms for weeks," Karen lied with the confidence of a politician promising lower taxes. "Respiratory distress, unusual discharge, possible mad cow disease symptoms." The morning air carried the sweet smell of hay and the bitter taste of absolute bullshit as I led Dr. Reeves through my herd. My cattle were healthier than Olympic athletes, and it showed within 5 minutes of professional examination. "These are some of the finest Angus cattle I've seen in 20 years, Dr. Reeves announced after testing blood samples and checking medical records. "Vaccination schedules are current, nutrition is optimal, no signs of disease anywhere in this operation." Karen's face went through more color changes than a traffic light during rush hour. Her biological warfare strategy had backfired more spectacularly than a defective firework. "Ma'am, filing false disease reports is a serious criminal offense," Dr. Reeves told Karen with the authority of someone who'd had enough of waste-of-time investigations. "State resources aren't toys for personal vendettas." But while Karen was playing amateur veterinarian, her financial world was collapsing like a house built on quicksand. The phone calls started that afternoon. First the Hendersons, then the Parkers, then the Johnson family. 3 contracts totaling over $2 million, all demanding refunds for fraudulent property promises. "She promised us exclusive ranch road access as part of our homeowner amenities," Mrs. Henderson told Channel 8 News with the fury of someone who'd discovered Santa Claus was a lie. "We signed contracts based on access to private property she had no right to sell." Maria Santos called with updates that sounded like music to my ears. "Jake, Karen's entire real estate business is imploding. Word's spreading through Dallas social media that she's been selling property access she doesn't own. Her broker's threatening to terminate her affiliation." The sound of Karen's empire crumbling was more satisfying than bacon sizzling on Sunday morning. But Princess Karen wasn't surrendering without one last desperate gambit. Thursday morning brought the most brazen attempt yet. Karen tried to bribe me. She showed up at my gate alone, no entourage or emergency committee, just one desperate woman with a checkbook and delusions of negotiating power. "Jake, let's be reasonable adults about this situation," Karen said, her voice honey-sweet with barely concealed panic. "I'm prepared to offer you $25,000 for a permanent easement across your property." The audacity was breathtaking. 6 months of harassment, trespassing, sabotage, and lies, and now she wanted to buy what she'd been trying to steal. "Not interested," I replied, continuing to fill cattle troughs while she watched my wall construction progress. "50,000, Karen countered, desperation creeping into her voice like water through a cracked dam. "That's more money than most ranchers see in 5 years." Ray's crew was pouring concrete for the final wall section, each truckload making Karen's position more hopeless. The smell of fresh cement mixed with her growing panic created an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. "75,000 plus I'll drop all complaints and agree not to pursue any legal action," Karen offered, playing her final card with the desperation of a poker player going all in with a losing hand. "Lady, my property rights aren't for sale at any price," I said, turning to face her directly. "You should have thought about negotiations before you started your war on my family." The wall reached full height that afternoon, 12 feet of steel-reinforced concrete that would outlast both Karen and her delusions. Electronic gate installation began immediately, solar panels glinting in Texas sunshine like technological victory flags. Karen's final act of desperation came at 3 a.m. Friday morning. My security cameras recorded her BMW approaching the nearly completed gate at ramming speed. The impact sounded like thunder mixed with the screaming of German engineering meeting Texas concrete at 35 miles per hour. The gate held firm. The BMW's front end crumpled like aluminum foil in a vise. Steam rose from the destroyed radiator while Karen climbed out, screaming obscenities that would have made a sailor blush. Sarah and I watched the footage over morning coffee, marveling at the complete collapse of Karen's sanity and automotive investment. "She really tried to ram our gate with her car," Sarah observed with the amazement of someone watching a nature documentary about stupid predators. "Desperation makes people do crazy things," I replied, feeling satisfaction settle in my chest like morning sunshine. "Good thing we built that wall strong enough to stop a tank." The sound of sirens approaching in the distance meant Deputy Martinez was about to arrest Karen for vehicle assault and destruction of property. Justice was finally coming home to roost. The annual Millbrook County Fair turned into the stage for Karen's final performance, and what a show it was. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of clear blue sky that makes Texas proud of itself. Perfect weather for community celebration and public justice. The fair was already buzzing with families, livestock displays, and the smell of funnel cake mixing with barbecue smoke when the media circus descended. 3 television news crews had followed the Karen Bradshaw story from property dispute to criminal investigation, and they weren't missing the climax. Camera trucks lined the fairground parking lot like electronic vultures waiting for roadkill. I was judging the youth cattle competition when I spotted Karen's arrival through the main gate. She'd assembled what looked like her last loyal supporters. Maybe a dozen HOA members clutching signs reading "Property rights for everyone" and "Stop rancher bullying." The irony was thicker than county fair molasses. Karen marched toward the information booth where local officials were holding their traditional State of the County presentation. Her timing was perfect. Maximum crowd, maximum media coverage for her final desperate stand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen shouted, her voice carrying across the fairgrounds like a carnival barker announcing the freak show. "We need to discuss the illegal wall blocking emergency access to our community." Heads turned, cameras swiveled, and suddenly the whole fair was watching suburban drama unfold under the big Texas sky. Karen had everyone's attention, exactly what she'd wanted for months. That's when I stepped up to the microphone. "Folks, I'm Jake Riverside," I said, my voice calm as Sunday morning. "Ms. Bradshaw has been trespassing on my private property for 6 months. And now she's upset that I built a legal wall to protect my cattle from her harassment." The crowd murmured like bees discovering honey. Karen's face went through more color changes than a sunset over cotton fields. "That's a lie," Karen screamed, her composure cracking like old paint. "This man is blocking public access roads that have been community property for decades." Time for the evidence. I pulled out a folder thicker than a Sears catalog and handed copies to the gathered media. Property deeds going back to 1940, permits for my agricultural security wall, and documentation of 47 separate trespassing incidents by Ms. Bradshaw. The cameras ate it up like hungry cattle at feeding time. Reporters started flipping through pages, while Karen's support group began whispering among themselves like church ladies discovering scandal. "There's more," I continued, feeling the crowd's attention focus like sunlight through a magnifying glass. "Ms. Bradshaw has been selling ranch access to home buyers, promising them use of my private property without my permission." That's when the buyer parade started. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward from the crowd, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been lied to and didn't appreciate it. "Karen Bradshaw promised us exclusive ranch road access as part of our home purchase. We signed contracts based on access she had no legal right to provide." Behind her, 2 other families nodded agreement, their faces showing the special kind of anger reserved for people who'd been conned by smooth-talking real estate agents. The Texas Real Estate Commission investigator chose that moment to make his announcement. He'd been waiting in the crowd like a hunter in a blind, timing his revelation for maximum impact. "Based on our investigation, Ms. Bradshaw's real estate license is hereby suspended pending formal hearings on fraud charges," Investigator Williams announced to the assembled crowd and rolling cameras. "This represents a pattern of misrepresentation to home buyers dating back several years." Karen's world collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Her remaining supporters started backing away like people discovering they'd been standing next to a lightning rod during a thunderstorm. But the show wasn't over yet. Deputy Martinez appeared from the crowd, warrant in hand, moving with the deliberate pace of justice finally arriving at its destination. Karen Bradshaw, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing, property damage, fraud, and vehicle assault, Martinez announced while the cameras rolled and the crowd watched in stunned silence. The handcuffs clicked with the finality of a judge's gavel. Karen's perp walk past my 12-foot wall made for perfect television, defeated fraud artist meeting immovable justice under the bright Texas sun. Any final comments, Ms. Bradshaw? A reporter shouted as Martinez loaded her into his patrol car. Karen's response was a stream of profanity that would have made a rodeo cowboy blush, all captured in high definition for the evening news. As the patrol car pulled away, I found myself standing next to my wall with half the county watching. The structure rose 12 feet of steel-reinforced concrete, as permanent and unmovable as the property rights it protected. Mr. Riverside, Channel 8's reporter asked, any regrets about this conflict? I looked at the wall that had cost me $52,000 but saved my sanity, then at the crowd of neighbors who'd witnessed justice being served. Only regret is that it took this long, I said, my hand resting on concrete that would outlast both Karen's schemes and my own lifetime. Property rights aren't suggestions. They're the foundation of everything we build in America. The crowd erupted in applause that echoed across the fairgrounds like thunder rolling over the plains. 6 months later, Karen's legal saga wrapped up like a country song. Everybody got what they deserved. The criminal trial was shorter than a summer thunderstorm. Karen pleaded guilty to fraud, harassment, and property damage charges rather than face a jury of ranchers and farmers who understood property rights better than the 10 Commandments. 18 months probation, $25,000 in restitution, and a permanent restraining order that kept her 500 feet from my property line. Her real estate license vanished permanently, along with her dreams of financial recovery through other people's property. The civil lawsuits from defrauded buyers resulted in another $180,000 in judgments that forced Karen to sell her mansion at a loss that would make a banker weep. Last I heard, she'd moved back to Dallas, working at some office job that didn't involve promising people things she couldn't deliver. Sometimes justice tastes sweeter when it's served with a side of humble pie. The new HOA leadership turned out to be reasonable human beings who understood the difference between community cooperation and property theft. President Williams, a retired teacher with more sense than ambition, established a good neighbor policy that respected everyone's property rights. Mr. Riverside, on behalf of the HOA, I want to formally apologize for the harassment you endured, Williams announced at their first post-Karen meeting. Property boundaries are legal facts, not negotiating positions. The community healing happened faster than spring grass after winter rain. We hosted a barbecue at our ranch that brought together old-timers and reasonable newcomers, proving that city folks and country folks could coexist when mutual respect replaced entitled demands. My wall became something of a local celebrity. Ray Molina's construction company started specializing in agricultural security barriers, using our project as their showcase example. Built to stop BMWs and bullies became their unofficial slogan. The technical success exceeded every expectation. Our electronic gate operated flawlessly through 18 months of Texas weather. The security cameras documented 0 unauthorized access attempts, and my insurance premiums dropped significantly, with controlled access eliminating liability concerns. But the real victory was personal peace. Morning coffee on the porch tasted sweeter without the sound of Karen's engine violating our property. Cattle fed on schedule without BMW-induced panic attacks. Sarah's garden flourished without daily doses of trespassing-related stress. The social good initiative grew from our experience into something meaningful for the whole community. The Millbrook Ranch Education Fund, established with speaking fees from property rights presentations, had already awarded scholarships to 12 rural students pursuing agricultural degrees. Every kid deserves the chance to build something lasting, I told the scholarship recipients at our annual award ceremony. Whether it's raising cattle, growing crops, or just standing up for what's right. The fund brought together former opponents in common cause. Even some ex-HOA members who'd initially supported Karen contributed to scholarships once they understood the real story. Turns out most people prefer truth over propaganda when given the choice. Practical lessons from our experience spread beyond Millbrook County. Property rights organizations used our case for educational seminars. Law enforcement agencies included our documentation methods in rural crime training, and the Texas legislature cited our situation during HOA reform discussions. The wall itself became a teaching tool. Visitors from across Texas came to see the structure that had ended suburban property theft, turning our ranch into an unofficial monument to constitutional rights and concrete determination. My morning routine remained unchanged: coffee, cattle check, gate operation for invited guests only. The difference was the absence of stress, the return of peace, and the satisfaction of knowing our property was permanently protected. "Think we'll ever have neighbor problems again?" Sarah asked one evening as we watched sunset paint the sky red over land that had buried 3 generations of riversides. "Not behind that wall," I replied, feeling contentment settle in my bones like good whiskey. The structure stood silhouetted against the evening sky, as permanent and unchanging as the property rights it represented. The cicadas started their evening symphony, mixing with distant cattle calls and the satisfied hum of electronic gates protecting what was ours. Peace had returned to Riverside Ranch, stronger than before and built to last.